Question 141. A business analyst assigned to review test output for a project realizes that an approved requirement has been missed. Which technique could the business analyst have used to ensure that requirements were delivered as stated? A. Use case. B. Requirements management plan. C. Traceability matrix. D. Work breakdown structure. This question described a common project failure. A requirement that was approved was somehow lost or forgotten and never implemented. The question asks for the preventative tool or technique that is specifically designed to track the life of a requirement from its approval through to its testing to ensure this type of gap does not occur. Let's break down the options. A. Use case. This is an incorrect answer. A use case is a technique for specifying and documenting a requirement. It describes what the system should do. It is a requirement itself, not the tool used to track its implementation and delivery throughout the project. B. Requirements management plan. This is an incorrect answer. The requirements management plan is a document that defines a process for how requirements will be managed, including how they will be traced. It is the rule book, but it is not the actual tracking artifact that would have been used to catch the missed requirement. C. Traceability matrix. This is a correct answer. The primary purpose of a requirements traceability matrix, RTM, is to prevent this exact problem. The RTM links each individual requirement forward to its corresponding design elements, code modules, and most importantly, test cases. By maintaining this matrix, the team can perform a coverage analysis at any time. Before testing began, a review of the RTM would have clearly shown a gap, an approved requirement that had no test case linked to it. This would have immediately flagged that the requirement was missed. D. Work breakdown structure. This is an incorrect answer. A work breakdown structure, WBS, is a project management tool that decomposes a project scope into deliverables and work packages. It is used to organize the project's work at a higher level and does not provide the granular requirement-to-test case linkage needed to ensure every single requirement is covered. Question 142. What should a business analyst do after discovering that two solution requirements conflict? A. Communicate the conflict to stakeholders and facilitate a resolution. B. Update the requirements baseline and upload it to the project repository. C. Perform an impact analysis and propose a lower-cost alternative. D. Consult the sponsors and log the constraint. This question tests your understanding of the business analyst's role as a facilitator when issues are discovered within the requirements. A conflict between requirements means that they cannot both be implemented as written. The business analyst cannot resolve this conflict alone, as the requirements are owned by the business. Therefore, the BA's primary responsibility is to manage the resolution process. Let's break down the options. A. Communicate the conflict to stakeholders and facilitate a resolution. This is a correct answer. This is a core function of a business analyst in this situation. The first step is to make the relevant stakeholders aware of the problem. Once the conflict is understood, the BA must then facilitate a discussion or workshop where the stakeholders can analyze the issue and make a decision on how to resolve it, e.g., by modifying one requirement, removing one, or finding a compromise. B. Update the requirements baseline and upload it to the project repository. This is an incorrect answer. The business analyst cannot unilaterally change the requirements baseline. The baseline is a formally approved set of requirements, and any change to it must first be agreed upon by the stakeholders through a resolution process like the one described in Option A. C. Perform an impact analysis and propose a lower-cost alternative. This is an incorrect answer. While performing an impact analysis of the conflict is a good supporting activity, the first and most important step is to communicate the existence of the conflict to the stakeholders. The BA must first get the stakeholders to agree that there's a problem before they can start proposing solutions. D. Consult the sponsors and log the constraint. This is an incorrect answer. While the sponsor might need to be involved if the stakeholders cannot reach an agreement, the first step is to work with the stakeholders who own the conflicting requirements. Also, a requirements conflict is best logged as an issue to be resolved, not necessarily a constraint. Question 143. A company is in the final phases of implementing a project for a client. Which tool or technique could the business analyst use to iteratively validate the solution? A. Expected versus actual results. B. Expected versus actual costs. C. Schedule variance. D. Quality variance. This is a tricky question that requires a careful interpretation of the phrase, validate the solution. While one common interpretation relates to functional testing, another relates to the ongoing validation of the solution's business value and viability, which is a key responsibility for a business analyst. Let's break down the options. A. Expected versus actual results. This is an incorrect answer, although it is a very strong distractor. The comparison of expected versus actual results is a fundamental definition of testing. While testing is a form of validation, specifically confirming the solution meets functional requirements, the business analyst's role in validation often extends to a higher, more strategic level, which is better represented by another option. B. Expected versus actual costs. This is the correct answer. This refers to cost variance, CV, a key metric in earned value management. In a broader business analysis context, validating the solution includes ensuring that the solution remains a valuable and viable proposition for the business throughout its life cycle. The business case, which is based on a cost-benefit analysis, is the foundation for this value. By iteratively comparing the expected versus actual costs, the business analyst is helping to validate the ongoing financial viability of the solution. If actual costs are significantly exceeding expected costs, the solution's original business case may no longer be valid. C. Schedule variance. This is an incorrect answer. Schedule variance is a project management metric used to track progress against a timeline. While important for project management, it does not directly validate that the solution itself is meeting the business need or is a viable investment. D. Quality variance. This is an incorrect answer. Quality variance is not a standard project management or business analysis term. While one would measure quality metrics and compare them against a target, this is not the name of the technique itself. Question 144. A company is developing a new product for a customer and is required to verify and validate the product against the customer's acceptance test plan and requirements. The product was successfully verified against the acceptance test criteria, but the customer does not believe that the product meets the requirements. This occurred because the customer's acceptance test plan, A, was not formally accepted by the company, B, was incomplete and missing requirements, C, did not have measurable and testable requirements, D, was not included in the work breakdown structure. This question describes a classic project paradox. The product passes all the written tests, but still fails to satisfy the customer. This points to a fundamental flaw in the test plan itself. If executing the plan doesn't guarantee the product is correct, then the plan must not have been a complete representation of the customer's actual needs. Let's break down the options. A, was not formally accepted by the company. This is an incorrect answer. While formal acceptance of a test plan is a good practice, the core problem here is with the content of the plan, not the formality of its approval. An incomplete plan is still incomplete, even if it has been formally signed off. B, was incomplete and missing requirements. This is the correct answer. This is the only logical explanation for the scenario. The product was successfully verified against the acceptance test criteria, which means it passed every test that was in the plan. If the customer is still not satisfied, it must be because the test plan itself was incomplete. It was missing test cases for certain key requirements. Because these requirements were not covered by the test plan, they were not validated, and the gap was not discovered until the final review. C, did not have measurable and testable requirements. This is an incorrect answer. The scenario states that the product was successfully verified against the criteria. This implies that the criteria that existed in the plan were measurable and testable. If they hadn't been, the verification could not have been completed successfully. The problem is not the quality of the existing tests, but the absence of other necessary tests. D, was not included in the work breakdown structure. This is an incorrect answer. The work breakdown structure, WBS, is a project management tool for organizing the project's work. Whether or not create test plan was a line item in the WBS has no bearing on the quality or completeness of the content inside the test plan. Question 145. Which of the following is the best approach to enable developers and product owners to be in constant communication so that changes or issues that occur during development are exposed and discussed as they develop? A. Iterative. B. Waterfall. C. Agile. D. Linear. This question asks you to identify the project approach or methodology that is fundamentally built around the principle of continuous, close collaboration between the development team and the business representatives, like the product owner. The goal described is to have real-time communication to handle issues and changes dynamically. Let's break down the options. A. Iterative. This is an incorrect answer, though it is a very closely related concept. An iterative approach means that work is done in repeating cycles. Agile methodologies are iterative. However, iterative by itself only describes the cyclical nature of the development process. Agile is a broader term that encompasses the iterative process plus a core set of values and principles, including the emphasis on daily collaboration and communication described in the question. B. Waterfall. This is an incorrect answer. The waterfall model is a sequential approach where each phase, requirements, design, development, testing, is completed before the next begins. It is characterized by formal phase communication, which is the opposite of the constant communication described. C. Agile. This is a correct answer. The Agile mindset and its frameworks, like Scrum, are founded on the principle of close, daily collaboration between the development team and the business, represented by the product owner. One of the core principles of the Agile Manifesto is that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. This constant communication is designed specifically to ensure that issues are exposed early and that the product evolves based on continuous feedback. D. Linear. This is an incorrect answer. Linear is another term for the waterfall model, where progress flows in one direction through sequential phases. It does not support the level of constant communication and collaboration described in the question. Question 146. The business analyst generated a design specification for a new product. What is the best type of formal review to conduct with the customer to establish and approve requirements baseline? A. Critical design review. B. Production readiness review. C. System requirements review. D. Test readiness review. This question tests your knowledge of the different types of formal reviews that occur at key milestones in a project lifecycle. Each review has a specific purpose. The question is asking for the name of the specific review where the requirements are formally presented to the customer for the purpose of getting approval and establishing the baseline. Let's break down the options. A. Critical design review. This is an incorrect answer. A critical design review, CDR, is a technical review that takes place after the requirements have been approved. Its purpose is to evaluate the detailed technical design of the system to ensure it is ready for the development or manufacturing phase. B. Production readiness review. This is an incorrect answer. A production readiness review, PRR, occurs at the end of the project, right before the solution is deployed or goes live. It is a final check to ensure that the system is stable and that all operational support structures are in place. C. System requirements review. This is a correct answer. A System Requirements Review, SRR, is a formal review that is held at the conclusion of the requirements analysis and definition phase. The primary purpose of the SRR is to present the complete set of documented system requirements to the customer and other key stakeholders. The goal is to achieve consensus and obtain formal approval, which in turn establishes the approved requirements baseline. D. Test Readiness Review. This is an incorrect answer. A Test Readiness Review, TRR, is conducted just before the start of a formal testing phase, like system testing or user acceptance testing. Its purpose is to confirm that the test plans are complete, the test environment is ready, and the product is stable enough to begin testing. Question 147. A startup company sells organic vegetable and fruit smoothies. Management is tracking a rapid decrease in sales of their best-selling juice, so they contract a business analyst to identify solutions in order to increase sales by comparing similar products offered by competitors. Which technique or tool should be used? A. Trend analysis. B. Benchmarking. C. Competitive analysis. D. Focus group. This question is asking you to identify the specific name of the business analysis technique that involves researching and evaluating competitors' products to inform your own business strategy. The key phrase and scenario is comparing similar products offered by competitors. Let's break down the options. A. Trend analysis. This is an incorrect answer. Trend analysis is the technique used to analyze historical data to spot patterns over time. The company already uses this technique to discover the rapid decrease in sales. It is not the technique used to look at competitor products. B. Benchmarking. This is an incorrect answer, though it is a strong distractor. Benchmarking is a broad practice of comparing your company's performance, processes, or products against others. While competitive analysis is a form of benchmarking, the term in option C is more specific and therefore a better fit. C. Competitive analysis. This is a correct answer. Competitive analysis is a specific technique of identifying competitors and evaluating their products, marketing strategies, strengths, and weaknesses. The task described in the question, comparing similar products offered by competitors to find solutions, is a textbook definition of competitive analysis. D. Focus group. This is an incorrect answer. A focus group is an elicitation technique where you gather a small group of people, usually customers, to get their opinions and feedback on a topic. While a BA might use a focus group to understand why customers are switching to competitor products, the act of analyzing competitor products themselves is a competitive analysis. Question 148. For a large, highly complex project with significant risk, which elicitation technique should be used to analyze input to and output from the product? A. Interface analysis. B. Risk analysis. C. System analysis. D. Dependency analysis. This is a tricky question that requires you to consider all parts of the prompt, especially the context. The task is to analyze input to and output from the product, but the context is a large, highly complex project with significant risk. This context is the key to the correct answer. Let's break down the options. A. Interface analysis. This is an incorrect answer, although it is a very strong distractor. Interface analysis is a textbook technique for defining and analyzing the inputs and outputs of a system. However, it is a standard technique that focuses on the what and how of the interfaces. The question's heavy emphasis on significant risk suggests that a more specialized type of analysis is required to address the project's specific challenges. B. Risk analysis. This is a correct answer. Given the context that this is a highly complex project with significant risk, the most important analysis to perform on the inputs and outputs is a risk analysis. While interface analysis would define the inputs and outputs, a risk analysis would evaluate them for potential points of failure, vulnerabilities, and the business impact of those failures. For a high-risk project, simply defining the interfaces is not enough. The BA's primary concern must be to analyze them through the lens of risk to identify and mitigate potential problems before they occur. The elicitation would focus on what could go wrong with these inputs and outputs. C. System analysis. This is an incorrect answer because it is too broad and generic. System analysis can refer to the entire process of studying a system's problems and requirements. The question is asking for a more specific technique. D. Dependency analysis. This is an incorrect answer. Dependency analysis focuses on understanding the relationships and prerequisites between requirements, tasks, or components. While interfaces create dependencies, dependency analysis is not the primary technique for analyzing the inputs and outputs themselves, especially from a risk perspective. Question 149. An organization is evaluating the possibility of conducting business internationally. Which factors should be investigated at the onset of the initiative? A. Deliverables to be produced. B. External dependencies. C. Impacts on requirements baseline. D. Change control processes. This question is about the initial high-level analysis that occurs at the very beginning of a major strategic initiative, even before a formal project has been chartered. The company is in an exploratory phase, evaluating the possibility of expanding internationally. The focus at this stage is on understanding the broad landscape and the external factors that will influence the decision. Let's break down the options. A. Deliverables to be produced. This is an incorrect answer. Defining the specific project deliverables is a detailed planning activity that happens after the initial evaluation is complete and a decision to proceed with a project has been made. B. External dependencies. This is a correct answer. When a company considers expanding internationally, it must first investigate a wide range of factors outside of its direct control. These are external dependencies. This will include things like the laws, regulations, and tax requirements of the target countries, local market customs, languages, and cultural norms, the competitive landscape in the new market, availability of suppliers, and logistical infrastructure. Investigating these external factors is a critical first step at the onset to determine the feasibility, risks, and overall strategy for the initiative. C. Impacts on requirements baseline. This is an incorrect answer. A requirements baseline is created during the execution of a project. At the onset of the initiative, no project exists yet, and therefore there is no baseline to consider. D. Change control processes. This is an incorrect answer. A change control process is a project management framework that is established after a project is initiated. It is not a factor to be investigated during the initial evaluation of a business idea. Question 150. Which solution should be chosen according to the completed weighted ranking matrix? A. Enhance the existing system. B. Purchase off-the-shelf software. C. Develop in-house software. D. Outsource the development. This question requires you to interpret and calculate the results of the provided weighted ranking matrix to determine the best solution option. The correct choice is the option with the highest total weighted score. The calculation for each option is the sum of the weight times score for each of the four criteria. Let's calculate the total score for each option from the table. 1. Purchase off-the-shelf software. Open parenthesis 5 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 3 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 4 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 2 times 2 close parenthesis is equal to 10 plus 6 plus 8 plus 4 is equal to 28. 2. Develop in-house software. Open parenthesis 5 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 3 times 3 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 4 times 1 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 2 times 2 close parenthesis is equal to 10 plus 9 plus 4 plus 4 is equal to 27. 3. Outsource the development. Open parenthesis 5 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 3 times 3 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 4 times 2 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 2 times 1 close parenthesis is equal to 10 plus 9 plus 8 plus 2 is equal to 29. 4. Enhance the existing system. Open parenthesis 5 times 1 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 3 times 1 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 4 times 3 close parenthesis plus open parenthesis 2 times 3 close parenthesis is equal to 5 plus 3 plus 12 plus 6 is equal to 26. Based on a standard calculation of the matrix, the option with the highest score is outsource the development with a score of 29. Let's analyze the options based on these results. A. Enhance the existing system. This is an incorrect answer. This option received a total score of 26, which is the lowest score among all the choices. B. Purchase off-the-shelf software. This is an incorrect answer. This option received a total score of 28. While this is the second highest score, it is not the best option according to the matrix. C. Develop in-house software. This is an incorrect answer. This option received a total score of 27, which is lower than the scores for both purchase off-the-shelf software and outsource the development. Therefore, it should not be the recommended solution. D. Outsource the development. This is the correct answer based on the calculation, with a total weighted score of 29. This option ranks the highest in the matrix and is a solution that should be chosen. Question 151. One of the main purposes for creating a requirements traceability matrix is to A. Track how requirements can be connected to the solution. B. Provide test cases to validate solution deliverables. C. Document stakeholder approval of project requirements. D. Track the project solution scope. This question asks you to identify a main purpose of a requirements traceability matrix, RTM. The core function of an RTM is to create and maintain the relationships between requirements and other project artifacts throughout the project lifecycle, ensuring that nothing is missed. Let's break down the options. A. Track how requirements can be connected to the solution. This is a correct answer. This is the essence of forward traceability. A primary function of the RTM is to link each requirement to the specific solution components that are designed, built, and tested to satisfy it. This ensures that every requirement is ultimately addressed by the final solution and provides a foundation for impact analysis and verification. B. Provide test cases to validate solution deliverables. This is an incorrect answer. The RTM does not contain the test cases themselves. The test cases are separate artifacts. The RTM is used to link requirements to their corresponding test cases to ensure that every requirement has test coverage, but it is not the repository for the test cases. C. Document stakeholder approval of project requirements. This is an incorrect answer. While the approval status of a requirement can be an attribute tracked within the RTM, its main purpose is not to be the formal approval document. The primary function of the matrix is to track the web of relationships connecting requirements to other project elements. D. Track the project solution scope. This is an incorrect answer. Although it is related, the RTM does contain a list of all the requirements that make up the solution scope. However, its unique and primary purpose is not just to be a list, but to track the connections between those requirements and other artifacts. Option A is a more precise description of this specific function. Question 152. Which tool can be used to analyze how the system responds to various combinations of input conditions with the probability of each outcome? A. Weighted criteria. B. Functional decomposition. C. Decision tree. D. Expected monetary value. This question asks you to identify a specific analysis tool based on its description. The key phrases are various combinations of input conditions and with the probability of each outcome. This points to a technique that is used to model complex decision logic where uncertainty is a factor. Let's break down the options. A. Weighted criteria. This is an incorrect answer. A weighted criteria matrix is a tool used to compare and select from a set of distinct options, e.g., choosing a software vendor. It is not used to model how a system responds to a sequence of input conditions. B. Functional decomposition. This is an incorrect answer. Functional decomposition is a technique for breaking down a large system or process into smaller, more manageable parts. It is used to analyze scope and structure, not to model decision logic with probabilities. C. Decision tree. This is a correct answer. A decision tree is a graphical model that does exactly what the question describes. It uses a tree-like structure to map out a sequence of decisions or input conditions and their possible consequences or outcomes. Crucially, probabilities can be assigned to each branch of the tree, allowing the analyst to model and calculate the likelihood of each final outcome. D. Expected monetary value. This is an incorrect answer, although it is a related concept. Expected monetary value (EMV) is a statistical calculation, probability times impact, that is often used within a decision tree analysis to quantify the value of different paths. However, the decision tree is the model or tool itself that structures the analysis of conditions and outcomes. The question asks for the tool, not the calculation. Question 153. A major stakeholder of a project is surprised to learn that a particular requirement was not implemented during the latest launch. The business analyst tells the stakeholder that the requirement status was changed to deferred. What could have prevented the stakeholder from being surprised about the status change? A. The status should have been reviewed prior to project launch. B. The status should have been communicated to all project stakeholders. C. The status should have been updated in the traceability matrix. D. The status should have been communicated to the requirement source. This question deals with a breakdown in stakeholder management and communication. A surprise for a major stakeholder is a clear sign that their expectations were not properly managed. The core of the problem is that a significant decision was made about a requirement status, but that information did not reach a key person who needed to know. Let's break down the options. A. The status should have been reviewed prior to project launch. This is an incorrect answer. The status was reviewed and changed to deferred at some point. The problem isn't that a review didn't happen, but that the outcome of that review was not effectively shared with the right people. B. The status should have been communicated to all project stakeholders. This is a correct answer. This is a fundamental principle of requirements lifecycle management and communication. When a formal decision is made to change the status of a requirement, especially to defer or reject it, that decision and its rationale must be proactively communicated to all relevant project stakeholders. This ensures that everyone's expectations are aligned and prevents surprises like the one described. The fact that a major stakeholder was surprised is direct evidence of a communication failure. C. The status should have been updated in the traceability matrix. This is an incorrect answer, although it is a necessary step. Updating the requirement status in the traceability matrix is the correct way to record the decision. However, simply updating a document does not ensure that people are aware of the change. This passive act of documentation must be paired with the active process of communication to be effective in managing stakeholder expectations. D. The status should have been communicated to the requirement source. This is an incorrect answer because it is too narrow. While it is essential to inform the person who originally requested the requirement, other major stakeholders may also have a vested interest in it. The communication should go to all stakeholders who are impacted by or have an interest in the requirement, not just its original source. Option B is more comprehensive. Question 154. A business analyst is developing a traceability matrix to determine whether or not any gaps exist and to identify any discrepancies. Which critical field is needed to ensure that the traceability matrix is usable? A. Hierarchy. B. Requirements description. C. Status. D. Owner. This question asks you to identify the most fundamental component of a requirements traceability matrix. For any tracking document to be usable, it must contain the core information about the item being tracked. The image provided shows columns for ID, business need, status, and priority, but is missing the most essential piece. Let's break down the options. A. Hierarchy. This is an incorrect answer. While tracking the hierarchy or parent-child relationships between requirements can be useful for complex projects, it is not a mandatory field for a matrix to be usable. A simple, flat list of requirements can still be traced effectively. B. Requirements description. This is a correct answer. The single most critical field in a requirements traceability matrix is a description of a requirement itself. The entire purpose of the matrix is to trace requirements, so a clear statement of what each requirement is absolutely essential. Without the description, all other information in the row, such as the ID, status, priority, and any traceability links, is meaningless because there is no context for what is being tracked. C. Status. This is an incorrect answer. The image already shows a status column, and while it is a very important attribute for managing the requirements lifecycle, it is secondary to the description. You cannot track the status of something that has not been defined. D. Owner. This is an incorrect answer. Tracking the owner or source of a requirement is a best practice and very important for communication and management. However, it is not as fundamentally critical as the requirement description itself. A matrix without an owner is still somewhat usable, but a matrix without a description is not. Question 155. A business analyst is working with the project manager, company auditors, and project stakeholders to determine whether formal sign-off should be required for the project. For which reason would the business analyst recommend formal sign-off to the group? A. The organization follows an iterative project lifecycle. B. The project impact is contained within a small department of the company. C. Errors in the product could result in financial solvency. D. The industry is unregulated. This question is about determining the appropriate level of formality for a project's requirements approval process. The decision to require a formal sign-off is directly related to the level of risk and impact associated with the project. A formal sign-off creates a clear point of agreement and accountability, which becomes more critical as the stakes get higher. Let's break down the options. A. The organization follows an iterative project lifecycle. This is an incorrect answer. Iterative and agile life cycles typically favor ongoing collaboration and incremental approvals, like a product owner accepting a user story, over a single large, formal sign-off or requirements baseline at the beginning. An iterative approach would be an argument for less formality, not more. B. The project impact is contained within a small department of the company. This is an incorrect answer. A small, contained impact is a reason to use a less formal process. The overhead of a highly formal sign-off process is generally not justified for low-impact projects. C. Errors in the product could result in financial solvency. This is a correct answer. This statement describes a project with extremely high risk and severe consequences for failure. The term financial solvency implies that errors could potentially bankrupt the company. In any high-risk environment, a high degree of formality, control, and accountability is essential. A formal sign-off is a critical risk mitigation activity in this context, as it ensures that there is documented, unambiguous agreement from all key decision-makers on the requirements before development proceeds. D. The industry is unregulated. This is an incorrect answer. An unregulated industry is a reason for less formal control. Projects in highly regulated industries, like pharmaceuticals or banking, are the ones that demand extremely rigorous and formal processes, including multiple documented sign-offs, to prove compliance. Question 156. What is one benefit of documenting the change control process? A. Stakeholders understand the difficulty of managing requirements. B. Stakeholders know how to request changes. C. Stakeholders have a schedule of changes to be deployed. D. Stakeholders are shielded from how changes are assessed. This question asks about the primary benefits of creating and sharing a formally documented change control process. A documented process serves as a clear and consistent guide for all project participants, ensuring that changes are managed in an orderly fashion rather than in an ad hoc or chaotic way. Let's break down the options. A. Stakeholders understand the difficulty of managing requirements. This is an incorrect answer. While going through a formal process might give stakeholders an appreciation for the complexity involved, this is a secondary effect. The primary purpose of the documentation is to provide clear instructions and set expectations, not to elicit sympathy. B. Stakeholders know how to request changes. This is a correct answer. This is one of the most direct and important benefits of documenting the change control process. The documentation will explicitly define the procedure for submitting a change, including what forms to use, what information is required, e.g., a description, justification, and who to submit it to. This ensures that when stakeholders have a change, they have a clear and unambiguous path to follow. C. Stakeholders have a schedule of changes to be deployed. This is an incorrect answer. The change control process document describes how changes will be managed. The schedule for implementing approved changes will be found in the project schedule or release plan, which are separate documents. D. Stakeholders are shielded from how changes are assessed. This is an incorrect answer. A good change control process should do the exact opposite. It should be transparent, explain to stakeholders how their requested changes will be assessed, e.g., through an impact analysis, and by whom, e.g., a change control board. This transparency builds trust in the process. Question 157. During an initial project kickoff meeting for a new online product, the Vice President of Sales states, "I don't know much about the detailed requirements. I just know we need to capture 30% more of the market with this new product." Immediately after, the lead architect insists, "To ensure our system is modern and scalable, we must build this using a microservices architecture." As a business analyst, what should be your primary focus when starting the requirements elicitation process? A. Decomposing the market share goal into measurable business objectives and identifying the key business processes needed to support them. B. Documenting the architect's proposal as a primary non-functional requirement for the new system. C. Creating a detailed project plan and timeline based on the two stakeholder statements. D. setting up a series of workshops with both the sales team and the architecture team to resolve the conflicting priorities. This question tests your understanding of the hierarchy of requirements and the fundamental role of a business analyst in translating high-level business goals into a concrete set of requirements. The key concept is that business priorities must always drive technical decisions. A technical solution, no matter how elegant, is only valuable if it serves a well-defined business need. The statement from a VP of sales is a high-level business requirement, while the statement from the architect is a potential solution or technical constraint. Let's break down the options. A. Decomposing the market share goal into measurable business objectives and identifying the key business processes needed to support them. This is a correct answer. The statement, capture 30% more of the market, is a business goal. The first and most critical job of the business analyst is to work with the stakeholders to break down this high-level goal into specific measurable business objectives, e.g., increase user sign-ups from the 18 to 25 demographic by 50%, achieve a 10% conversion rate from free trials to paid subscriptions. From there, the BA can identify the business capabilities and processes needed to achieve those objectives. This analysis forms a foundation upon which all functional and non-functional requirements will be built and provides the necessary context to later evaluate the architect's technical proposal. B. Documenting the architect proposal as a primary non-functional requirement for new system. This is an incorrect answer. This action improperly prioritizes a technical solution, the how, before the business need, the what and why, has been fully understood and defined. While scalability is a valid non-functional requirement, a specific microservices architecture is a design decision. Accepting it as a primary requirement at this early stage without linking it to specific business needs would prematurely constrain the solution and could lead to building a system that is technically sophisticated but fails to meet the core business goals. C. Creating a detailed project plan and timeline based on the two stakeholder statements. This is an incorrect answer because this action is premature. It is impossible to create a realistic project plan, estimate effort, or set a timeline without first having a well-understood scope, which is derived from the detailed requirements. Attempting to create a plan based on one high-level business goal and one technical suggestion would be pure speculation and would not be a reliable guide for project. D. Setting up a series of workshops with both the sales team and the architecture team to resolve the conflicting priorities. This is an incorrect answer. While facilitating communication is a key BA skill, it is not the correct first step here. The two statements are not necessarily conflicting. They are simply at different levels of abstraction. The BA's job is not to immediately mediate a non-existent conflict, but to first perform a necessary analysis, as described in Option A, to create the business context. Once the business objectives and needs are clear, the BA can then facilitate an informed discussion about whether a microservices architecture is the most appropriate technical solution to meet those specific needs. Question 158. A business analyst is facilitating a requirements workshop for a new accounts payable system. The overarching business goal for the project is to reduce invoice processing time by 25%. During the session, an accounts payable clerk states, "To help us achieve that goal, we need the new system to allow us to process a batch of invoices from the same vendor all at once, instead of one by one." How should the business analyst classify the clerk statement? A. Stakeholder requirement. B. Business requirement. C. Solution requirement. D. Transition requirement. This question is testing your understanding of the requirements classification hierarchy, specifically the ability to distinguish between business, stakeholder, and solution requirements. A key concept in business analysis is that requirements are broken down from high-level goals into detailed features. The stakeholder requirement serves as the crucial bridge between the high-level business need and the specific functionality that the solution must provide. Let's break down the options. A. Stakeholder requirement. This is a correct answer. The clerk's statement is a perfect example of a stakeholder requirement. It is a specific need articulated by a stakeholder, the AP clerk, that bridges a gap between a high-level business requirement, reduce invoice processing time by 25%, and the detailed solution requirements that will be developed later. It translates the why of the business into a more concrete what from a user's perspective, which will then guide the design of the final solution. B. Business requirement. This is an incorrect answer. A business requirement represents a high-level goal or objective of the organization. In this scenario, the business requirement is reduce invoice processing time by 25%. The clerk's request for a batch processing feature is a more detailed need that supports and helps achieve the overarching business requirement, but it is not the business requirement itself. C. Solution requirement. This is an incorrect answer, although it is a strong distractor. A solution requirement describes the specific capabilities and qualities that a solution must have to meet the stakeholder requirements. It is the most detailed level, often broken down into functional requirements, e.g., the system shall provide a function to select multiple invoices and non-functional requirements. The clerk's statement is a need that will be analyzed and formalized by the business analyst into one or more detailed solution requirements. Therefore, the statement is the input to the solution requirements, not the solution requirement itself. D. Transition requirement. This is an incorrect answer. A transition requirement defines a temporary capability needed to facilitate the move from the current state, as is, to the future state, to be, such as data migration, user training, or temporary system interfaces. The request for a batch processing feature is a core, permanent function of the final product, not a temporary need required only during the transition period. Question 159. A business analyst is working on a project to build a critical online order processing system. During a meeting, the head of operations states, "This system is vital for our business. If the primary database server fails for any reason, the system must automatically fail over to the backup server within 30 seconds, ensuring that users can continue processing orders with minimal disruption." How should the business analyst classify this requirement? A. A functional requirement. B. A security requirement. C. A reliability requirement. D. A transition requirement. This question tests your ability to identify and correctly classify a specific type of non-functional requirement, NFR. Non-functional requirements describe the quality attributes and characteristics of solution, how well it performs a function, rather than the function itself. The stakeholder statement is not about a specific business action a user can take, but about the system's expected behavior under a failure condition. Let's break down the options. A. A functional requirement. This is an incorrect answer. A functional requirement specifies what the system does, e.g., the system shall allow a user to submit an order. The requirement described is about how the system behaves in the event of an error, which is a quality attribute, not a core function. B. A security requirement. This is an incorrect answer. A security requirement focuses on protecting the system and its data from unauthorized access or malicious threats, e.g., the system shall require two-factor authentication for all administrative users. The requirement for failover is not related to security, but to operational continuity. C. A reliability requirement. This is a correct answer. Reliability, as a non-functional requirement, specifically addresses the ability of a system to continue operating under stated conditions and its ability to recover from failures. The statement about automatically failing over to a backup server within a specific time frame is a classic example of a reliability requirement. It defines a measurable criterion for the system's ability to recover from an error and maintain availability. D. A transition requirement. This is an incorrect answer. A transition requirement describes a temporary capability needed to move from the current state to the future state, such as data migration or user training. The automatic failover capability is a permanent core feature of the to-be solution designed to be active throughout its operational life, not just during transition period. Question 160. A business analyst is defining the non-functional requirements for a new human resources portal that will store and transmit sensitive employee information, including salary and health data. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, states that all data transmitted must be protected. The lead developer suggests a specific implementation. The system shall use TLS 1.3 for all data in transit. Which of the following is the most appropriate way for the business analyst to document this need as a solution requirement? A. The system shall use TLS 1.3 for all data in transit. B. The system must be secure. C. All sensitive employee data transmitted between the user's browser and the server must be encrypted in accordance with the corporate data security policy #DS004. D. The security requirements will be defined by the development team during the design phase. This question tests your understanding of the difference between a well-written non-functional requirement and a technical implementation detail. A core principle of business analysis is to define what the solution needs to do, the business need, in a clear and verifiable way, without unnecessarily prescribing how the technical team should build it. This allows the technical experts the flexibility to choose the best implementation while still being held accountable to the business need. Let's break down the options. A. The system shall use TLS 1.3 for all data in transit. This is an incorrect answer. While this statement is specific, it documents a technical implementation, not a business need. This is a technical requirement. Prescribing a specific technology protocol like TLS 1.3 constrains the technical team. If a better or newer standard emerges, this requirement will become outdated and require a formal change request. The business analyst should focus on the required outcome, not the technical method. B. The system must be secure. This is an incorrect answer. This statement is a high-level goal, but it is not a good requirement because it is ambiguous and untestable. Secure can mean different things to different people, and there is no objective way to verify if this requirement has been met. Good requirements must be specific and verifiable. C. All sensitive employee data transmitted between the user's browser and the server must be encrypted in accordance with the corporate data security policy #DS004. This is a correct answer. This is an excellent example of a well-written non-functional requirement. It is solution agnostic. It states what needs to be done, data must be encrypted, without dictating how, the specific protocol. Specific. It clearly defines the scope of the data, sensitive employee data, and the context during transmission. Verifiable. It ties the requirement to an external, objective standard, the corporate data security policy, which contains the specific technical details that the solution must adhere to. This makes a requirement testable and gives the technical team clear guidance. D. The security requirements will be defined by the development team during the design phase. This is an incorrect answer. This represents a failure of business analysis. Deferring the definition of requirements is a high-risk practice. The business analyst is responsible for eliciting, analyzing, and documenting all requirements, including non-functional ones like security, to ensure the solution will meet the business's needs and risk tolerance. All right, that wraps up all the questions for today's video. I hope you found it helpful for your studies. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Let's build a strong learning community together. Happy learning, and I'll see you in the next one.